The conference room stretched wide enough to fit a small starship. Representatives from 12 species sat in their customized seating arrangements, each adapted to their unique biology. The required pressurized water pods, the needed heat lamps positioned overhead. The Delphines floated in gravitational suspension fields. Humanity's delegate sat in a plain metal chair that looked almost comically simple compared to the advanced technology surrounding her. Sarah studied the data scrolling across the holographic display in front of her. The numbers were worse than she'd expected. Veteran suicide rates had jumped 340% across the Galactic Confederation in just the last 5 years. The Void War had officially ended a decade ago, but it seemed the fighting hadn't really stopped. It had just moved inside the minds of those who survived it. Doctor floated to the center of the room. The psychiatrist's tentacles moved in patterns that Sarah's translator interpreted as deep distress. Had lived 3 full lifetimes by standards, over 200 standard years. She was considered the finest psychological expert in known space. "We have failed," announced. Her voice carried the weight of centuries. Complete failure across all treatment protocols. The display changed to show treatment methods. Sarah recognized some of them from human science fiction. Memory suppression therapy, where traumatic memories were chemically blocked from forming neural pathways. Neural rewiring, where the actual structure of the brain was altered to eliminate stress responses. Consciousness transfer, where a veteran's mind was moved into a fresh cloned body, leaving the traumatized flesh behind. "We can heal a severed limb in 3 hours," continued. "We can cure any disease. We can extend life indefinitely. But we cannot stop our warriors from taking their own lives. The technology that saves them on the battlefield cannot save them from their own memories." A general shifted in his seat. The reptilian warrior was covered in ceremonial scars from 100 battles. "Perhaps they are simply weak," he suggested. "Not all warriors are meant to survive the aftermath of war." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept quiet. She was the most junior member of the Terran delegation, only present because the senior ambassador had fallen ill. Nobody had expected her input to matter. Tentacles rippled with what the translator called disagreement. "These are not weak individuals. Many are decorated heroes. They survived impossible circumstances. The weakness is not in them. It is in our understanding." The display shifted again, showing brain scans from different species. Despite the biological differences, certain patterns remained consistent. Hyperactive threat detection, disrupted sleep cycles, emotional numbness alternating with overwhelming distress. Sarah recognized every symptom from her own experience and from the veterans she'd served with. "We have attempted memory suppression on over 50,000 veterans," reported. Initial success rates were promising. 92% showed immediate improvement, but within 1 standard year, 68% experienced complete trauma recurrence. The memories return, often more intense than before. "We don't understand why." A Delphine scientist spoke up, his voice like chimes. "The conscious mind forgets, but the body remembers. We have observed this repeatedly. The biological stress responses remain even when explicit memories are blocked." "Then we remove the biological responses," said a synthetic representative, its artificial form shifting between states. "Neural rewiring can eliminate the physical fear reaction entirely." "We tried that too," replied. The veterans reported feeling disconnected from all emotions, not just negative ones. Many said they no longer felt like themselves. Suicide rates in that treatment group were actually higher than in untreated populations. The room fell silent. Outside the windows, the capital city of the Confederation stretched across an entire moon, a testament to the combined advancement of 12 civilizations. They had conquered faster-than-light travel, mastered quantum computing, and built megastructures that reshaped solar systems. But they couldn't solve this. "Has anyone successfully treated combat trauma?" asked the observer. in any species at any point in recorded history. Tentacles drooped. Not by our definition of treatment. We define successful treatment as the elimination or significant reduction of symptoms. By that measure, no. Some individuals improve over time, but the improvement is inconsistent and unpredictable. We cannot identify why some recover while others deteriorate. Sarah shifted in her seat. The movement was small, but in the silent room it drew attention. Several representatives turned toward her. The senior diplomat addressed her directly. The Terran delegate wishes to speak. Sarah hadn't meant to draw attention to herself. She was just a former Marine sergeant who joined the diplomatic corps because civilian life had felt empty. But now every eye, sensor, and optical organ in the room focused on her. "I was wondering," she said carefully, "if humanity might have some relevant experience." "Humans have only been spacefaring for 50 standard years," the general said dismissively. "What could you possibly contribute?" Sarah felt the old familiar anger rise but pushed it down. "We've been fighting wars for about 10,000 years, maybe longer. We didn't have memory suppression or neural rewiring. We had to figure out other ways to deal with combat trauma." Tentacles lifted with interest. "You have treated this condition successfully." "I wouldn't say successfully," Sarah admitted. "But we've dealt with it. We have methods. They're pretty low-tech compared to what you've described." "Does it eliminate the symptoms?" asked the Delphine scientist. "No," Sarah said. "It doesn't eliminate anything. It helps people live with it." The room erupted in confused murmuring. Several translators struggled with the concept. The synthetic representative spoke first. "Clarify, you allow the condition to persist." "We don't really have a choice," Sarah explained. "Humans can't just delete memories or rewire our brains. Well, we're starting to develop that technology now, but for most of our history we couldn't. So we developed other approaches: therapy, support groups, counseling, medication to manage symptoms, not eliminate them." "And this is considered acceptable?" The general sounded horrified. "You leave your warriors damaged." Sarah met his eyes directly. "We're all damaged, that's part of being in combat, but damage doesn't mean useless or broken. A lot of our veterans go on to live full lives. Not all of them. Too many don't make it, but some do, and we've gotten better at helping them over time." Moved closer to Sarah's position. "Explain your methods in detail." "Well, there's talk therapy," Sarah began. "A veteran meets with a trained counselor and just talks about their experiences. The counselor doesn't try to fix anything. They just listen and help the veteran process what happened." "Talking," repeated the synthetic representative. "Verbal communication about traumatic events. How does this provide treatment?" "I don't fully understand the psychology," Sarah admitted. "But something about putting experiences into words helps, and having someone listen without judgment matters. A lot of our therapists are veterans themselves. They understand in a way civilians can't." "Peer support," said thoughtfully. "Veterans helping other veterans. We have not attempted this approach." "There are also group therapy sessions," Sarah continued. "Multiple veterans meet together and share their experiences. They realize they're not alone in what they're feeling. That seems to help too." The general leaned forward. "You put traumatized warriors together. Doesn't this simply reinforce the trauma?" "Sometimes, maybe," Sarah said. "But mostly it does the opposite. There's something powerful about realizing other people have the same nightmares you do, that you're not crazy or weak, that what you're experiencing is a normal response to abnormal circumstances." "Normal," repeated. "You classify combat trauma as normal?" "For someone who's been in combat, yes. It would be weird if you didn't have some kind of reaction to the things you see and do in war." Sarah pulled up her personal data pad and displayed some statistics. "Look, our methods aren't perfect. We still lose veterans to suicide. We still have people who can't function normally. But our rates have improved over time as we've refined our approaches. And the key thing is, we work with the trauma instead of trying to erase it. The room fell silent again as the representatives processed this information. It went against everything their civilizations had learned about medicine and psychology. They fixed things. They solved problems. They didn't just learn to live with them. Finally, the senior diplomat spoke. "Delegate, would humanity be willing to send experts to teach us these methods?" Sarah blinked in surprise. "You want us to teach you? Your medical technology is centuries ahead of ours. But our understanding of living with trauma is apparently centuries behind yours," said. "We are desperate. Our current approaches are failing. If your primitive methods are more effective than our advanced technology, then we must be humble enough to learn from you." "I'd need to contact Earth," Sarah said. "This isn't really my decision to make, but I think we'd be willing to help. A lot of our veterans struggle to find purpose after their service. Teaching others how to cope might give them something meaningful to do." "Then please make the request," the diplomat said. "We will prepare facilities and provide whatever resources your experts require. The Confederation is willing to compensate generously." Sarah nodded slowly. "I'll send the message today, but I should warn you our methods take time. We're talking months or years, not days or weeks, and they require the veterans to actively participate in their own recovery. You can't just do it to them." "At this point," said quietly, "we will try anything. Our warriors deserve better than what we have given them." As the meeting adjourned, Sarah sat alone for a moment, looking out at the magnificent city beyond the windows. She thought about the Marines she'd served with, about the ones who made it and the ones who didn't. She thought about her own therapy sessions, the group meetings she still attended twice a month, the ways she'd learned to carry her memories without letting them crush her. Humanity had always been considered the newcomers in the Galactic Confederation, the primitive species still figuring out the basics. But maybe, just maybe, their lack of advanced technology had forced them to develop something valuable in other ways. They'd learned to be broken and keep living anyway. She opened her secure comm and began composing a message to Earth. This was going to be an interesting conversation. The transport ship deposited Sarah and her team on the 3 months later. She stood at the head of a group of 20 humans, all veterans, all volunteers. The youngest was 26 and had served in the Mars Colony Defense Force. The oldest was 83 and had fought in Vietnam. He'd insisted on making the journey despite the physical challenges of interstellar travel. "I've been helping kids deal with their demons for 50 years, the old man said when Sarah questioned whether he was up to it. His name was Martinez, and he walked with a cane carved from earth oak. "I'm not stopping now just because the kids have tentacles." The Confederation had prepared a facility for them, a massive complex that looked more like a hospital than anything Sarah had seen in VA centers back home. Everything was sterile and white. Automated systems monitored every room. Medical equipment hummed with quiet efficiency. Met them at the entrance, her tentacles moving in patterns that the translator rendered as pleased greeting. "Welcome to Central Veterans Treatment Complex. This is our primary facility for combat trauma cases. We have 3,000 patients currently in residence." 3,000, Sarah said, "in one facility." "We have 17 such facilities across member worlds," replied. "This one specializes in severe cases. Many of these individuals have been here for multiple standard years." Sarah exchanged glances with Martinez. The old veteran shook his head slightly. Sarah understood. They discussed this on the trip. Institutionalization was the opposite of what helped most veterans recover. "Can we tour the facility?" Sarah asked. They walked through corridors lined with individual rooms. Each room contained a single patient connected to monitoring systems. The rooms were comfortable by medical standards but isolated. No windows looking onto common areas. No spaces for socialization. In one room, a warrior sat motionless on a reinforced bed. The species were massive, averaging 9 feet tall with 4 arms and armored skin. This one, identified as Al by the chart outside his door, stared at nothing with all 4 eyes. Al was a decorated officer, explained. He led a strike team for 7 years of combat. Then his entire unit was killed in an ambush. He was the only survivor. How long has he been here? Sarah asked. 4 standard years. He has memory suppression twice. Both times the memories returned within months. He is currently scheduled for voluntary termination in 2 weeks. Termination. Martinez spoke for the first time since the tour began. You mean you're going to kill him? It is a mercy, said quietly. He has requested it. The pain is too great, and we have no treatments left to offer. It is considered the ethical option when all other approaches have failed. Sarah felt sick. Can I talk to him? He does not communicate with staff anymore, but you may try. Sarah entered the room alone. Al didn't acknowledge her presence. Up close, he was even more imposing than she'd expected. His armored skin bore scars from dozens of battles. His 4 arms were thick with muscle. He was built to be a perfect warrior, which somehow made his current state even more tragic. She pulled up a chair and sat down. My name is Sarah. I'm from Earth. I'm a veteran too. Nothing. Al continued staring at the wall. I was a Marine, Sarah continued. Fought in the Belt Wars. That probably doesn't mean anything to you. Different scale than what you experienced, but I lost people. I know what that feels like. Still nothing. I'm not here to fix you, Sarah said. I can't fix you. Nobody can. But I came here with a team of people who've been through similar things, and we want to try a different approach. Not treatment, just support. Finally, Al's eyes shifted toward her. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding stone. Support. Another word for failure. You cannot help. They cannot help. Nothing helps. You're probably right, Sarah agreed. Nothing helps the way you want it to. The memories don't go away. The pain doesn't disappear. But maybe you can learn to carry it differently. I do not want to carry it. I want it gone. I know, but that's not an option. Trust me, if memory suppression worked, you wouldn't still be here. Al was quiet for a long moment. Then what is the point? The point is that your unit deserves to be remembered, not just as names in a database, but as people who mattered to someone. If you die, that goes away. Who's going to remember them then? Something flickered in Al's eyes. It might have been anger or pain or something else entirely. I remember them every moment. It is torture. Yeah, Sarah said softly. It is. But maybe torture with company is better than torture alone. She stood to leave. As she reached the door, Al spoke again. You said you lost people. Do you still remember? Sarah turned back. Every day. Their faces, their voices, their stupid jokes. The guy who died in my arms kept trying to tell me something but couldn't get the words out. I still don't know what he wanted to say. I think about it constantly. And this is acceptable to you? No, it's not acceptable. It's just reality, but I'm still here. I still get up every morning. I still find things worth doing. The pain is part of me now, but it's not all of me. She left before Al could respond. Outside, Martinez was waiting. The old veteran had been watching through the window. That one's got about 2 inches of will to live left, Martinez said. If that. I know, Sarah replied, but 2 inches is enough to work with. Over the next week, Sarah's team began implementing changes to the facility. They met resistance at every step. The medical staff couldn't understand why the humans wanted to remove monitoring equipment, why they insisted on bringing patients together into common areas, why they rejected the carefully calibrated medication protocols. You're reducing their treatment, a Delphine doctor protested. This is medically irresponsible. We're not doctors, Sarah explained for the 10th time. We're not here to treat a medical condition. We're here to help people cope with their experiences. The distinction is meaningless. No, it's everything. You keep trying to fix them like they're broken machines, but they're not broken, they're hurt. There's a difference. Despite the resistance, they made progress. They converted a large dining area into what they called a common room, comfortable seating arranged in circles rather than rows, no medical equipment in sight. They brought in a few items from Earth, a coffee maker, some musical instruments, art supplies, books. This looks like a recreational area, observed, not a treatment facility. That's because it's not about treatment, Martinez explained. He was setting up the coffee maker with the care of someone performing a sacred ritual. It's about creating space for people to be human together, or whatever. I do not understand how this addresses psychological trauma. You will, Martinez said, give it time. The first group session was a disaster. Sarah gathered 20 veterans from different species. Most sat in hostile silence. A few left immediately. One warrior accused them of wasting his time with primitive nonsense. But 3 veterans stayed, and they talked. A Delphine pilot named Sora spoke first. Her voice was barely audible through the translator. I killed them, she said. A refugee ship. My targeting systems identified it as hostile. I fired before I could verify. 2,000 civilians died because I pulled a trigger. The room held its breath. In Confederation medical facilities, such admissions were documented, analyzed, and used to refine treatment protocols. Here, in this circle of chairs, there was just listening. Sarah spoke next. I lost my best friend to an IED. We'd been joking around 10 seconds before. Then she was just gone. I keep thinking if I'd been walking faster or slower, if I'd said something different, maybe it would have changed where we were standing. A name shifted his massive bulk. My unit tortured prisoners for information. I participated. I told myself it was necessary. Now I cannot forget their screaming. They sat in silence for a while. Outside the windows, the city glowed with bioluminescent beauty. Inside this room, 3 people from 3 different species shared the oldest human experience, the weight of what they'd done and seen in war. Does it get better? Sora asked finally. The guilt. No, Sarah said honestly, but you get stronger at carrying it, and it helps to carry it together. The sessions continued daily. Attendance grew slowly. Some veterans came once and never returned. Others came every day. Al showed up on the 3rd week, standing in the doorway but not entering. He listened from outside the circle for 2 full sessions before finally taking a seat. When he spoke, his voice shook. I was ordered to abandon my unit. Command said retreat was necessary. I followed orders. They died. I lived. This is unacceptable. Martinez, who'd been quiet through most sessions, leaned forward. Son, you've been in the military. You know orders are orders. Your unit knew that too. I should have stayed, should have fought with them. Then you'd be dead too, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. Would that be better? Al's 4 fists clenched. Yes. Bullshit, Martinez said flatly. That's survivor's guilt talking, and it's the biggest liar you'll ever meet. Your unit didn't die so you could waste the life they saved. They died doing their duty. Honor that by living well, not by throwing away what they preserved. You do not understand culture. A warrior who abandons his brothers has no honor. And a warrior who pisses away the sacrifice his brothers made has even less. I don't care about culture. I care that you're sitting here breathing when good people aren't, and that means something. You owe them a life that means something. Al stood suddenly, and for a moment Sarah thought he might attack Martinez. The old man didn't flinch. Then Al's shoulders slumped, and he sat back down heavily. I do not know how to live with this, he said quietly. None of us do, Martinez replied. That's why we're here together, learning as we go. The breakthrough came during week 6. Sarah organized what she called an open circle, where any veteran could share anything without structure or time limits. 50 veterans attended, the most they'd had in any gathering. Al stood and spoke for 20 minutes about his unit. Not about their deaths, but about their lives. The way his second-in-command could identify enemy positions by sound alone. The private who sang before every battle in a voice that made even the enemy pause to listen. The medic who'd saved Al's life 3 times and never let him forget it. As he spoke, Al's voice grew steadier. He was crying, the first tears anyone had seen from him in 4 years. But he didn't stop talking. He told stories that made some veterans laugh despite themselves. He described his brothers not as dead heroes but as living people who'd existed and mattered. When he finished, the room was silent. Then Sora stood and began talking about her lost crew, then spoke about the soldiers he'd served with before everything went wrong. One by one, veterans shared memories not of trauma but of the people they'd lost. Sarah watched from the edge of the circle, tears streaming down her own face. This was it. This was the thing no technology could replace. The simple act of remembering together, of making the dead live again through stories, of transforming private grief into shared memory. After the session ended, Al approached Sarah. "I have canceled my termination request," he said. "I do not know if I will ever be whole, but I think my brothers would want me to try." "They absolutely would," Sarah agreed. "How long does this process take? This learning to carry the weight?" Sarah smiled sadly. "The rest of your life, but it gets easier with practice." Al nodded slowly. "Then I will practice, and perhaps I can help others practice as well." "That's actually something we wanted to talk to you about," Sarah said. "We're going to need peer counselors, veterans who understand what others are going through. Would you be interested?" For the first time since Sarah had met him, Al's 4 eyes showed something other than pain. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it might have been purpose. "Yes," he said, "I would be honored." 6 months after Sarah's team arrived on the Galactic Confederation's Mental Health Committee reconvened. The emergency session had become a routine review, but the subject matter remained critical. Doctor presented the findings. Her tentacles moved in patterns the translator interpreted as cautious optimism, an emotion rarely seen in the typically stoic. "The human program has produced remarkable results," she began. Statistics appeared on the holographic display. Veteran suicide rates in facilities using the human approach have decreased by 67%. Treatment requests for memory suppression have declined by 48%, and more significantly, voluntary termination requests have fallen by 71%. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the assembly. The general who had been skeptical 6 months ago leaned forward in his seat. "How is this possible? The humans use no advanced technology, no neural intervention. They simply talk to each other." "That is not entirely accurate," replied. "What they do is more complex than simple conversation. I have spent these months observing their methods, and I have come to understand something fundamental about our failure." She changed the display to show neural imaging from veterans in both traditional treatment and the human program. "For centuries, we have treated combat trauma as a malfunction, a psychological error to be corrected, an unfortunate side effect of war that requires medical intervention. Our entire approach has been predicated on the assumption that these symptoms are abnormal and must be eliminated." "Are they not abnormal?" asked the Delphine representative. "That depends on your definition of normal," said. "The humans argue that extreme stress responses to extreme circumstances are actually normal, expected, even. The problem is not that our veterans develop these symptoms. The problem is that we lack the cultural infrastructure to help them live with these symptoms." She displayed images from human history, veterans groups spanning, philosophical texts about the nature of suffering, art and literature exploring trauma, religious practices designed to give meaning to pain. "Humans have been dealing with combat trauma for their entire recorded history," explained. "They never had the option to simply erase it technologically, so they developed something else, a cultural framework for carrying wounds that don't heal, philosophy that accepts suffering as part of existence, community structures that ensure no one suffers alone, art that transforms pain into meaning. "We had such things once," said an elderly observer, "before advanced medicine, before we could simply remove the suffering." "Precisely," agreed. "We solved so many problems with technology that we forgot how to live with the ones that technology cannot solve. We became dependent on the ability to fix everything. When we encountered something that cannot be fixed, we had no framework for accepting it." The synthetic representative spoke up, its artificial voice carrying genuine confusion. "But surely elimination of suffering is superior to acceptance of suffering. Why would we choose to retain painful experiences?" Sarah stood from her seat. She'd been invited to observe this meeting, though she hadn't expected to participate. "Because you can't eliminate it. You've tried. Memory suppression fails. Neural rewiring creates people who don't recognize themselves. Consciousness transfer doesn't work because the trauma is part of who they are, not just stored in a particular body." She walked to the center of the room, aware of dozens of alien eyes watching her. "You keep treating trauma like it's a virus that needs to be destroyed, but it's more like a scar. It's the mark that experience leaves on a person. You can't remove it without removing part of the person themselves. So we should simply accept that our warriors will suffer." The general's voice was challenging but not hostile. He'd become one of the program's strongest advocates after seeing the results. "We accept that suffering is part of being alive," Sarah replied. "Especially for people who experienced extreme things. The goal isn't to eliminate the suffering. It's to give people the tools to carry it, the community to share it with, and the purpose to make it meaningful." She thought about Al, who was now training as a peer counselor. About Sora, the Delphine pilot who'd started an art therapy program using human techniques. About the dozens of veterans who were learning to live with their scars instead of dying from them. "The humans have a concept they call post-traumatic growth," added. "The idea that people can become stronger through suffering, not despite it. That trauma can be transformative rather than purely destructive. This is foreign to our medical thinking, but the evidence supports it." New statistics appeared. Veterans in the human program showed higher rates of community engagement, creative output, and what humans called finding purpose. They weren't happier in simple terms, but they were living fuller lives. "I have come to believe," said slowly, "that we made a fundamental philosophical error. We pursued the elimination of all suffering because we had the technology to do so. But in the process, we lost the wisdom of how to suffer well, how to transform pain into meaning, how to carry weight together instead of trying to remove it alone." The room fell silent as the representatives processed this. It went against everything their civilizations had built over. The entire project of advanced civilization had been to eliminate suffering through technology and progress. "What you're suggesting," the Delphine representative said carefully, "is that our advancement in some ways made us less equipped to handle certain fundamental experiences." "Yes," confirmed. "We became so skilled at avoiding pain that we forgot how to endure it. The humans never had that luxury. They had to develop the psychological and cultural tools to live with unavoidable suffering. And those tools, primitive as they seem, are more effective than our advanced technology for this particular challenge." The general stood. "I move that we establish the Human Veterans Initiative as a permanent program across all Confederation worlds. Furthermore, I suggest we train our own people in these methods so we are not solely dependent on human expertise." "Seconded," said the diplomat. The vote was unanimous. Sarah felt a strange mixture of pride and sadness. Pride that her species could contribute something valuable to the Confederation. Sadness that the contribution was rooted in humanity's long history of suffering. After the meeting, Al was waiting outside. The warrior had been invited to attend but had declined. saying his presence might intimidate the politicians. Instead, he'd been running a group session for newly discharged veterans in an adjacent building. "How did it go?" he asked. "They approved the program," Sarah replied. "It's permanent now, and they want to expand it to other worlds." Al nodded slowly. "Good. There are many who need this. I have spoken with 3 new veterans today. All thought they were alone in their suffering. All were surprised to learn others share their pain." "You're good at this," Sarah said. "Better than some human counselors I've known." "I understand the darkness because I have lived in it," Al replied. "That is the only qualification that matters." They walked together toward the common room. Through the windows, Sarah could see veterans of different species sitting in circles, talking or simply being present with each other. Some were crying. Some were laughing. Most were just existing in shared space, carrying their invisible weights together. Martinez was in his usual spot, making coffee for anyone who wanted it. The old veteran had become a fixture in the facility, a steady presence who never pushed but was always available. Several young veterans gravitated toward him naturally, drawn by something they couldn't quite name but desperately needed. "You know what the funny thing is," Sarah said to Al. "Back on Earth, veterans struggle because civilians don't understand what they've been through. There's this gap between those who experienced combat and those who haven't. But here, we brought that gap with us as a gift." "I do not understand," Al said. "We're separated from you by species, biology, culture, everything. But we understand your pain better than your own people do because we've carried similar pain ourselves. The gap between species is smaller than the gap between those who've seen war and those who haven't." Al considered this. "You are saying that suffering is a universal language." "Something like that. It's the most human thing about us, but it turns out it's not just human at all." A young veteran approached them hesitantly. She was small for her species, barely 7 feet tall with fresh scars across her armored plates. "Counselor Al, I was told you might have time to talk." "Always," Al replied gently. He glanced at Sarah. "If you will excuse me." Sarah watched them walk away together. The massive warrior and the soldier, 2 people from different species united by shared understanding of what it meant to survive when others didn't. She found herself thinking about the first conversation she'd had with the Confederation Committee, when they'd been desperate and willing to try anything. They'd seen humanity's methods as primitive, a last resort when advanced technology failed. But Sarah understood something they were only beginning to grasp. Humanity's methods weren't primitive, they were ancient. There was a difference. They were the accumulated wisdom of thousands of generations who'd had to figure out how to keep living after terrible things happened. No shortcuts, no technological fixes, just the slow, painful work of carrying grief and guilt and trauma without letting it destroy you. The work of building communities that could hold space for suffering without trying to eliminate it. The work of finding meaning in experiences that seemed meaningless. Other species had probably developed similar wisdom in their own ancient histories, but they'd lost it when they gained the ability to technologically eliminate most suffering. Humans had never had that option, so they'd never lost the skills. Sarah walked to where Martinez stood with his coffee maker. The old veteran was teaching a Delphine how to brew a proper cup, treating the lesson with the gravity of passing on sacred knowledge. "You think this will last?" Sarah asked him quietly. "After we leave?" Martinez poured 2 cups, handed her one. "Doesn't matter if it lasts. Matters that we did it. These folks needed to know it's possible to survive carrying what they carry. We showed them. What they do with that knowledge is up to them." Very philosophical for a grunt. "I've had 50 years to think about it. Makes you philosophical whether you want to be or not." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching veterans from a dozen species learn to do what humans had been doing for, sitting with pain, sharing stories, carrying weight together, and finding reasons to get up tomorrow even when today was unbearable. Sarah's comm buzzed. A message from Earth. More veterans wanted to volunteer for the program. More counselors were being trained. The demand was exceeding expectations. She smiled. Humanity had joined the Galactic Confederation as the primitive newcomers, the species still figuring out the basics of faster-than-light travel. They'd been invited to the table out of courtesy more than respect. But they'd brought something to that table that no advanced technology could replace. The simple, terrible, beautiful knowledge of how to be broken and keep living anyway. How to make scars into stories. How to transform suffering into meaning. It wasn't what anyone had expected humanity's contribution to galactic civilization would be, but it might have been the most important one they could offer. Because in the end, no matter how advanced a civilization became, no matter